right, well, welcome everybody. We have Beth Azor with us today, who is very successful in everything commercial real estate related, but best known as the Canvassing Queen and retail leasing specifically. So welcome to the CRE arena. The goal of this podcast is for the listeners and the people on the podcast to get better at everything commercial real estate, business, and life. So hopefully this does it for you here today. And we are just so incredibly grateful to have Beth on. And just grateful you've built an incredible career for yourself. So wanted to welcome you on and just thank you for coming.
Thank you, Augie. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you. So as I mentioned before, I didn't know exactly how to introduce you because you've done so much. You've done a lot from ownership to management to retail leasing, your academy, and it seems like you're really good at a lot of things commercial real estate. So overall, just very successful in commercial real estate. I thought that would be the best way to introduce you. So if you wanted to, get started by telling us, a little bit about yourself and what you're doing, where you're at now, but then take us back to, where it all started and how you got into this career.
Sure. Well, you get to do a lot of things well when you're in it as long as I've been in it. So, so 36 years in, today I own a portfolio of $100 million worth of retail centers. So I do a lot of things, but it all centers around retail and shopping centers. So I own the 6 shopping centers. I actually sold one last week. I keep forgetting about that. So I'm down to 5. We sold one for $22 million. So I guess my portfolio is down to $78 million now, but I have another deal I have under contract for 10. So my portfolio value will go up and down depending on acquisitions and sales. Yeah. I have a mission in life to help retail leasing agents and also women invest. So I have a conference in March where it's a women investment conference where I'm trying to teach women that the stock market is not the only place to invest your money, especially if you are in the business of commercial real estate. We have wisdom and experience and knowledge that we should be using to help build our family's portfolio and wealth, and not just for our clients. I travel the country teaching leasing agents how to fill space creatively and faster. And we have an event called the South Florida Independent Retailers Awards where I love to promote mom and pops. I love to canvass and meet independent retailers. So we have a conference down here, an awards program, think like the Oscars or the Emmys, where we vote on brokers and landlords in South Florida vote on the best of in each category. And that will be our 4th year coming up in November. So we're really, really excited about that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And that's so good to hear. And to hear you say, to get into ownership, which we'll definitely get into, but also helping women in this business, I think is incredible because, demographic, when you look at the demographics, it's, traditionally a male dominated business, but I just talked to Robbie Lober, who's another young, impressive broker out of Tampa. And we were talking about all of the women along the I-4 corridor in Central Florida, especially in the industrial world. Like me and Robbie agreed and shared on the podcast that we gotta, it's not even like watching our backs. It's like watching our fronts because these gals are out to kill and they are really, really good at what they do. So that's so encouraging to hear you, say that and also be, kind of raising up the next generation, not only of, brokers and agents, but also to get into ownership and build that, generational wealth. So that's really cool. So you said 36 years ago, which that seems to be impossible. I don't know how you were in this 36 years ago, but what was your first step into commercial real estate? So where'd you get your start?
So my parents were in residential. So at 18, I got my license. And during weekends or during college summers, I would do sit open houses and do the residential thing. And then when I graduated college, I got a job as a special events coordinator for not-for-profit, but I was only making $11,000 a year. So, fast forward to today, that's probably in today's money about 35. So that wasn't a lot of money to pay my bills. So I did real estate on the weekends. So for 2 years, I did my Heart Association job where I was the special events coordinator, which I loved. And then I would work real estate on the weekends. And after 2 years of working 7 days a week, I had gotten a raise from 11 to 23 at the Heart Association, but I was making about 30 on my 2-day-a-week job in residential. So I decided to flip-flop and just volunteer at the not-for-profit and go into the private sector with residential. And I immediately hated it. I hated residential full-time, 5 days a week. I sat in a trailer at a development, and I went to the developer and I said, we need to have events. We should, I was a special events coordinator. We need to bring traffic. And he said, no, you just sit in the trailer and read People magazines. And when the people come in, you sell them. And I was like, oh, I made a terrible decision leaving a job I loved for money. So, but I was there about 3 months, and a woman that was helping us out on the weekends, her full-time job during the week was a leasing agent for a shopping center company, a developer. And she said, you need to get into commercial real estate. And I said, oh, yuck. Isn't that just selling land? That's what I thought it was. She said, no, there's this thing called leasing. And when you help people open their first businesses, like a bagel store or a dry cleaner, basically, you help them with their American dream. And from that point on, you're part of the family. And I said, sold. Where do I sign up? And she said, there's this company called Terra Nova in Miami, and they have a training program. They train leasing agents. So I said, okay, I would love to talk to them. So I called them up and I said, who handles your training program for leasing agents? And they said this woman's name. And I said, did she go to Florida State? And they said, yeah, she went to Florida State. Augie, she was in my sorority at Florida State.
Oh, wow.
So she picked up the phone and she goes, Beth from Florida State? And I said, yeah. And she says, you're hired, just come meet the boss. So I stayed there 18 years, and I grew from the rookie leasing agent training department all the way to the president. And the last 18 years I was the president there.
Wow.
And I started buying deals with my partner boss. He put me in some deals. I put money in deals. And then I left there in 2004. My son was 4, and I was a single mom, and I couldn't be a president of a big company anymore. So I wanted to do something on my own. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew I was going to start buying more on my own account. And that's what I did. And I've had my own company and the coaching company and the training company now since 2004.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so at Terra Nova, it was mainly Terra Nova, right?
Yep.
So it was mainly third-party management, or they did leasing, buying? It was all in-house properties?
Yeah, we were a full-service firm, but mostly third-party provider. We had,
Gotcha.
of the 50 properties we had for life insurance companies and pension funds, we also had probably 7 to 8 of our own deals that we owned and managed and leased, but the majority of our portfolio was for third party.
Yeah, and that's incredible to hear that. That was part of the. I was going to ask you about the transition from going, from a salaried employee or staff of a company, even though being the president, and then going out to being on your own, and usually well, at least normally in a lot of like brokers worlds, they go from. So I went from like a research analyst to full-time sales associate. So it was like. It was, an hourly position to like a full-time commission, or full commission position, but to go from a, salaried position to saying, hey, I'm going to go out here and, just buy real estate for myself. So, and how was that at first? I know you said you partnered with some deals, with your old boss at Terra Nova, but then when you went out for yourself, was that something it was, you just started smaller strictly with your own funds, or were you, family and friends syndicating, or did you full on, bring on capital, or what was that like?
Sure. So when I first started at Terra Nova, I remember my salary was $18,000, but it was really like a draw. So for many of the years that I was at Terra Nova, we were pretty much a commission only. I was a commission-only agent, so I definitely lived that life. When I started getting into management, like when I became the leasing director, and now I have to hire a team and train a team, that's when the salary came into play, when I got into leadership positions. And then I was supervising, at one point, 14 leasing agents that were all commission-only. So I completely understand the whole commission-only brokerage model, and I participated in that before I started becoming very involved in the leadership positions. so certainly when I left and said, okay, I'm not going to be the president of this company anymore, there goes the big salary, the paid for assistant, all of the bells and whistles that I had as being the president of that company. The good news is timing is everything, Augie. I had just leased, so I still leased, even though I was the president of the company, I still leased properties. And I had just leased a 300,000 ground up new development.
Wow.
So, and I, besides getting a salary, when I would work on deals like that, I also got commissions.
Yeah.
So I had a nice little nest egg.
Yeah.
Building. I had probably received most of the first halves of those fees and had the second halves coming, so that when I left and went out on my own, I had a pipeline of income, which I tell people all the time when they call me, what should I do? I have these deals, and I say, well, stay where you're at, close the deals, and then have this little pipeline of second halves, because probably in industrial too, you get paid the first half at execution and then the second half when they open, right? So I had that for my kind of cushion to get started on my own. But I had also been invested wisely while I was making the bigger bucks when I was in the leadership. So I had put money away. I had a bunch of second halves coming. My first deal that I bought, which was about a year out from being at Terra Nova, was a small 1.77 acre piece of property. It was 1.2 million. And my goal was to go get 10 friends at 100 grand. In the end, I think I got maybe 12 partners. We got a loan for 50%. Some people put in 100, some people put in 50. I had a couple people at 25, but I definitely raised the family and friends for that first deal, and I think I put in 200.
Yeah. No, and that's a great way to do it is do the family and friends deal, and that was my thing starting out with investing is, as I'm sure you're aware, the syndication model has gotten increasingly attractive. I wouldn't say attractive, popular, over the last 4, 5, 6 years. And I think in a certain sector, it's gotten a little bad just because it seems like there's a lot of people, maybe with not a lot of real estate experience, that are coming in and syndicating deals, and just because it's really been sourced off the deal. So if somebody has a deal and it's like, hey, this is a good deal. If you have it under contract and the market's been so hot, there's been so much money in the economy that you can find the money. But the track record and the resume and just the experience of property ownership and management and leasing, those are all different. So just knowing how to underwrite a deal and close a deal versus running it and adding value to it and all those sorts of things, it's a much different ball game. So, and did you find that as you started to do investment deals, this first one that you're talking about, the piece of land, so it was raw land, and then
Yes.
did you develop it or did you flip it, or?
So it was an out parcel of a property, and my goal was to do 2 ground leases, because I wasn't the REA, the restricted the easement agreement didn't allow you to split the property, so I couldn't sell them. So I couldn't sell it. If I was going to sell it, I had to sell it as a whole. So my plan was to do 2 ground leases. I was negotiating with a Taco Bell and a chicken concept when I got a call from Walgreens.
Oh, wow.
And I never thought Walgreens would be interested because the property was not on a hard corner. It was an interior site. And at the time, Walgreens really only did hard corners at lights. So it was pretty funny when we got their call. We ended up doing a ground lease with Walgreens, and then the developer that was building the Walgreens building ended up making us an offer we couldn't refuse, and we sold it to them. So we made, within 18 months of buying it, almost 300% on our money.
Wow.
Which was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's quite a way to do your first deal.
It was, and then I didn't understand about 1031s, so everyone just paid their taxes, and then I found another deal about 9 months later, and all those people that were in that deal rolled into the new deal.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful thing, and that's actually what I did with my first deal as well. I didn't do a 1031 exchange, and it wasn't because I didn't know about it, but it was, almost 2 years ago, a little over a year and a half ago or so, and the market was just so hot. There's such limited inventory out there that I really told myself, and it was very hard being young and just receiving a big chunk of change, and wanting to actively buy deals. And we probably put, I put 7, 8, 9 offers out there,
Right.
but I said, hey, I can either pay the tax on it, and that's what I told myself, was like, I'm either going to pay the tax, and because when you're buying a deal and we're going to finance it, so I said I would much rather pay the taxes than make a bad real estate decision.
Right. For
so
sure.
especially, like I said, especially being younger and starting to build my investment portfolio, I said, hey, paying taxes is going to hurt a lot less than if I assign, $1, $2, $3 million worth of bad debt to my name.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that was the call there.
And that happens, right? I mean, I'm buying a deal right now, and the sellers are like, are you in an exchange? Because, they want to boost up the price. They want to know how desperate I am, because people are desperate when they have that clock ticking on that exchange. So absolutely. I don't like putting a gun to my head and trying to find a deal. I do think that's definitely when people start buying bad deals. They try to convince themselves it's a good deal when just pay the taxes.
Yeah. And that timeline, like you said, that time clock that's just ticking on the 1031 exchange, there's some pressure there. Like I didn't really like being under the gun, like you're saying. It's a great position to be in, especially if you just made money, but like that time just clicking away of, hey, you got to buy a deal, or pay the tax. It's just that's a pressured feeling, which is rough. So
yeah.
So when did you start? So you went from so how being in ownership and then growing that portfolio. So did you just solely work on investment deals and accumulating your portfolio from an investment side for how many years before you started to get into more of the advisory and training leasing agents and whatnot?
So I would say within 9 months of me leaving Terra Nova, I started getting calls from REITs, because I trained a ton of people when I was at Terra Nova. There were a lot of people in South Florida that were no longer with Terra Nova that I trained, that went and became the directors of leasing at other companies. And
Gotcha.
And they were very successful. So I had, I guess, a good reputation of being, and the other thing is, when I was at Terra Nova, we didn't have a lot of success hiring people from the industry, because we just had a different culture. Even though they were commission only, we had expectations of them. So hiring someone from, a brokerage firm across the street never really worked out, because we just had a very special culture. So I started
Right.
early on hiring kids out of college or residential. I hired guys that worked at gyms and sold gym memberships or used car lots. And we created really great leasing agents through the training program that I was hired into from the person
Right.
that was my college friend. So the fact that we had this training program and a lot of people knew of it, within 6 or 9 months of me leaving Terra Nova, I started getting the calls. And I thought, oh, well, this is great. I can just kind of, the first call was Ramco Gershenson, which is now RPT in Detroit. And then they said, we just hired 4 kids out of University of Michigan. Do you want to come up and train them? And I said, Detroit, January, not so much. Maybe if you send them down here, I think you have some assets in South Florida and you have an office in Boca. I said, I'll put together a week-long training program and we'll canvas for your assets down here. They loved that idea, and it was a huge success, and they told their friends, and the phone just started ringing, and I said, okay, I can do this. I think I was a teacher in another life. So I like teaching young leasing agents. And I love going canvassing, whether it's for my asset or theirs. So it worked out, and I've been doing it since probably 2005. So now we just have different programs that we have available for, any types of sizes of companies, whether it's a family-owned company, a REIT, a one-off, where you have one leasing agent. So we pretty much cultivate the programs to the customer.
Yeah. And so for those that may not know and may should have explained this earlier since I introduced you as the Canvassing Queen, can you define canvassing for us?
Sure. So canvassing is, so this is a question on Twitter actually last week. Someone said, what's the difference between prospecting and canvassing? And so since I've canvassed over 10,000 hours, I definitely believe I am the expert of canvassing. Canvassing is going out into the community and literally visiting stores. Again, I'm retail, but you can also, I've done this with office leasing teams and industrial leasing teams as well, but you're going into your clients' businesses, whether it's an accounting firm in a high-rise office building, whether it's a sneaker store in a retail center, a bagel shop. You're visiting those tenants, dropping off a flyer and saying, hey, we have a property down the street, or we have a property in the next market over. Are you expanding? Are you looking for addition? For in retail, unlike office and industrial, it's very easy for many retailers to open a second and a third location, right?
Right.
Most likely in office and in industrial, you're actually asking them to relocate. So
right.
In retail, my friends don't mind if I'm canvassing their properties because I'm not canvassing them across the street from my properties. They're usually 10 minutes away or 15 minutes away because I'm asking them, hey, you're in Pembroke Pines, do you want to come up into Davie? So, so canvassing is actual in-person dropping off a flyer at someone's business versus prospecting is, prospecting can be cold calling, networking, right. Reaching out to tenant rep brokers. Prospecting is like the umbrella and canvassing is under the umbrella.
Right. No, thank you for that. And yeah, I know that term, prospecting, door knocking, canvassing, it gets thrown around. So
and I have clients in Texas and they call it door stepping. They call canvassing door stepping. And I'm thinking of like country western dancing with it. Oh, we're going door stepping today.
That's how they do it in Texas, I guess. So for you, and I want to ask you this, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of crazy things, but so when you're going, around these shopping centers, I'm sure you've seen some crazy things. So like, maybe one or two, like what is some of the craziest things like or most unexpected, like you knock on a door and say, and introduce yourself, or like, what's happening? Because in commercial real estate, anything can happen, and I have a story afterwards. But yeah, I know you've put in a lot of hours canvassing. So what's one of the craziest things you've ever seen while being out there?
Yeah, the craziest thing, I was with two of my coworkers, and we were canvassing a 2-story suburban office park, and we were on the second floor. And we opened the door, and it was a swingers club.
Oh no!
And it was a Friday afternoon, and there were people in there.
Oh
and
my gosh.
I walked in, I looked around. It was dark, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized, wow. There were jacuzzis in this place. It was.
My word!
I said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and we backed up and shut the door and ran out. And I was like, that happened probably in 1987. I'll never forget it.
Wow, that's funny. In an office park, you would not expect that.
Second floor of an office park.
Second floor, jacuzzis and everything. That's crazy.
Yes, it was crazy.
I can't even imagine. So there was one that, and the story just came up, I just thought of it. So one of my really good buddies, Sonoa Lawson, who actually got me into this business, he was a teammate of mine out of college. And, he did research with me. He did, sales and leasing for a while. And then he got an opportunity in management to kind of lead the management department. And there was a few people that were out that day. And he was just like, we had a lot going on with our property management division. And it was just, he was in a storm. He was already like, I think he was sleep deprived. He was overwhelmed. He was anxious. I think he was just already stressed out. And he had like a couple weeks like this. And then one day he walked by my office and he was like sluggish. He was just kind of like sluggish. And he's like a, taller, like buff dude. And he's just kind of sluggish walking by my office. And I like And I went to go see what's wrong with him, and I like poked my head up, and I was like, "Hey, bro, like what's going on?" And I realized he had a golf club in his hand, and I was like, "What are you doing, dude? Like, where are you going?" He said, "Oh, I'm going to." He said he was going to. It was one of our properties that we managed. He's like, "Yeah, I'm going to one of our properties." He's like, "Man," he's like, "They sent me a picture." He said, "Look at this picture," and he showed me a picture on his phone, and it was like a 7 or 8 foot snake that was outside of the unit. It was like a salon. So, and he has a golf club in his hands. So I said, like, dude, what are you going to do with a golf club? B, like, this is not the job for you. Like, you need to call, like, animal control or something. And then he told me, he's like, I called animal control, and they said they can't do anything about it unless it's inside the unit.
Oh, my God.
And so since it was on the exterior, like, butted up against the door. And so he and he told me, like, I guess, it was a salon, so there was like 10, 12, 13 gals inside the salon. None of them would come out.
Oh my
and
gosh.
So he went down there, and thank God by the time he rolled up, the snake was gone. But he had the picture of it, and he was like, it was just the peak of the mountain that he was, I guess the pit of the valley is more like it. He was already, feeling rough, and like, he's not really an outdoorsy type guy, and he just had a golf club to go chase this thing out of there. So
hilarious. Yeah, well, property management things, the property management stories that, could probably be my third book for sure.
Yeah. And no, that's one of the things I tell people, and nothing against people that are in residential or property management, but I tell friends that want to get into real estate, and I just say, like, real estate is a great idea. You should definitely get into it. However, it's like, just stay out of residential and stay out of property management, and your life will be incredible. So I think all of the other routes, and like I said, they're absolutely necessary. I work with some really, really good property managers, and as you know from owning centers and managing centers, you have to have good property managers, but those are hard jobs.
For sure.
Yeah, some days you get called down with a golf club to chase out snakes, and but the leaking roofs and overflows and all of that. So that's really special side of the business.
For sure.
So, and question for you: so when I know, like, when canvassing, so do you usually do more or like that you're training for? Do you do more tenant rep or landlord rep? Because I know they're completely different sides of the business, and obviously we need both, but what would you prefer? And it sounds like more on the landlord rep side is like where you've started and what you specialize on, but also the tenant rep side, have you dealt with that too much? Or what's your, like, the differentiator between the two? Like, what do you prefer, and what do you like doing most of?
So I definitely prefer landlord rep. I've absolutely had my share of tenant rep. I've repped lots of different companies, LA Fitness, companies that don't even exist anymore. But for me, my passion is filling vacancies. I don't mind going and sourcing business. I have very good friends that love tenant rep because they don't want to be prospecting. They like having everyone call them, "Hey, does your tenant want to come into my property?" I always tease my friends, you're working for free, because you don't get paid unless you get a deal. And a lot of times the tenants can change their mind. Oh, we're going to roll out 20 new locations. Oh, well, maybe just one. And you spend hours and hours of tours and tour books and whining and dining, these people, and in the end they decide, well, we're not going to do that rollout. The rents are too high in this market. So I don't like working for free, but again, I don't mind prospecting. So my friends who love doing tenant rep, they're like, yeah, we definitely have some of those situations where the retailers change their minds. However, I don't want to prospect. So you go do that. And I always tell like newbies that are coming into the business that, look, if you don't want to prospect, then try to hook up with and partner with a tenant rep broker that you can help them be their junior and learn that business. But know that you're working for free, because unless that tenant commits and does a deal, you're not going to get paid. Versus if you're a landlord rep broker, if you bring a prospect, to a landlord that has a vacancy, we're going to do that deal because we want to fill that vacancy. So we're not going to change our mind. Oh no, we don't like that tenant. We don't want you to, we've decided we're not leasing that vacancy. That might happen 1% versus, I think, tenant rep brokers, chase down locations for tenants a lot of times that change their minds.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's just like working with buyers and sellers. That's one thing we preach over and over and over again is, get the listing agreement. And it's the only, we say, I don't want to say they are, but I'll change it to they can be. So one of the things that's said repeatedly is buyers can be liars. So, it's like you go around with a buyer and say, hey, they want to buy this or that or the other. And with the way that the market's been, there's so much competition for one deal that if one deal's out there, that's, that's pretty much it. So.
Yeah, have control, right? Have control of the listing, right? That's like you don't have control of buyers for sure.
Yeah, same thing with like tenants. It's, hey, we want to do one, we want to do one unit versus we want to do 20 locations.
Exactly.
But yeah, if you're working with a landlord, it's like, hey, we have 5 vacancies. We need all of them filled.
Exactly.
So, no, that certainly makes sense. And then for you, like I guess on the landlord rep side, but then also like your personal portfolio. So what style centers, because I know there's many different types of centers and I've worked with all different types, but for your personal portfolio, do you look more for, like the mom and pop, like neighborhood shopping plaza, or are you looking for like the newer, multi-tenant or, single tenant deals, or what's kind of the bread and butter? What do you look for there? Like with, age, construction type, vacancies. I assume you like vacancies because you...
Actually, I'll surprise you. I'm going to surprise you with that. My favorite shopping centers are 100% leased.
Okay.
That someone that's 80 years old owns it, and he's very happy collecting his rent every month, and he has zero idea that the rents across the street are $20 higher.
Yeah.
That is my perfect deal. I love when I see 100% leased shopping center, I think the rents are too low.
Yeah, true.
So I don't look for these value add 20% vacant properties because that's a sign. That's a sign. So I like, and I'm a big supply and demand girl, so I don't want power centers because back in the 70s and 80s in 80s and 90s when I got in the business, there were big boxes, there were multiples of them. There were 3 linen guys, 3 bookstores, 3 office supply stores, 3 toy stores, 3 baby stores, 3 electronic stores. Well, the internet has taken that away, and now we're lucky if we have one category, one store in each category. So I focus on the service strip centers, service and food. So for example, I have Panera, Starbucks, Mission Barbecue, cell phone stores, nail salons, barbershops, internet resistant businesses. No one's getting their hair cut on the internet. So I don't need anchors. I look for strip centers that are flush, that run parallel to a very high traffic street. I want very high income neighborhoods because those neighborhoods have those consumers in those neighborhoods have good disposable income to go out to dinner 3 or 4 nights a week or to go to a lunch place on Saturday and to spend money.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And that's a good point of what you said about not only the positioning of the shopping center, because I've seen 1,000 times those weird elbows, you get stuck back in the corner. I've found so many shopping centers that like the elbows of them, of like an L-shaped shopping center, they're still dirt floors. I've seen quite a few that it's like, hey, we'll build it when a tenant comes, but usually you build it and they come, but in those, in the corners of centers like that, that's really difficult. And another thing you said about, the vacancy factor. So that's another thing that I see is like whenever I pass a shopping center and it's, 70, 75% occupied, if it's in a good neighborhood, it's got good median household income, good traffic, the 2 mile or 2 mile radius, 10-minute drive time. If all of those things are good, usually no matter who the landlord is, like it's going to be filled because nobody's going to turn away the money for a lease. They may not be charging market rate, but they're not going to turn away a tenant. And usually in those areas, tenants flock You know, they want to open up their businesses there. So, right. And then that also gives you the opportunity to work with newer businesses and expanding. And I can really appreciate what you said. That's some of the most fulfilling work that we do, even on the industrial side, is, hey, somebody's, you know, they've been in a, 5,000 square foot multi-tenant bay, and now they're looking for 20 or 25,000 square feet, and, they're expanding. So I'm sure that's something you see that's really cool. And like you're saying, in retail, it's like add locations. So
right.
I don't know if you have any confidentiality on this, but do you have a tenant that you've done like the most amount of deals with?
Well, I'll tell you a fun story that it's not as much as multiple locations, but it's increase in their current size. So so I'm in South Florida, and you've already heard I'm a Florida State Seminole. Well, one day on the way to, and I have 3 shopping centers right in a row on a main street called University Drive. It's got 65,000 cars a day. So on my way to work one day, I see these little signs in the medians, like in the grass, and it says, University of Miami Hurricane Apparel. And there's literally 40 of these signs. And I'm like, and I can see from the address on the sign that they're in a warehouse area nearby. So I say, I've got to go check. I got to go find this guy. He's got apparel, which is a dying use in little strip centers. They're either online or they're in malls. And he's in a warehouse. So I follow the address. I go check him out, and he was closed, and I peek in the window, and it's about 3,000 square feet full of sneakers and jerseys, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy needs to be in a retail. What is he doing in a warehouse? Yeah. So it's July, so that he's prepping for football season. So I call him, doesn't call me back. I finally get and then I forget. The signs go away. I'm busy doing my business. I forget. Didn't put him in my CRM. So a year later, I'm driving to work one day, and here's 40 of these signs again, July, like football season. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to find this guy. So now I'm hell-bent, and I went over to the warehouse. It said call for an appointment. So I finally connect with him, and I say, I own this shopping center. You need to be a tenant in my shopping center. He's like, I can't afford your rents. And I said, okay, I know it's football season, but in January, I'm going to haunt you until we meet and I show you my spaces. So January comes, he comes walking into my leasing office, which was on site, and I see him with his logoed shirt. I ran to the front. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're here. And so I said, look, I have a space next to a $2 million sub shop. I said, it's in bad shape, but if you take it as is, I'll give it to you for football season, $1,000 a month. So I said, what are you paying in the warehouse? And he said, $1,500. I said, great. Take this. It's 1,100 square feet. It's $1,000 a month. You fix it up. I'm not going to, you give me insurance, pay the utilities, $1,000 a month, no deposit. Just go fix up. It was a leftover space from a Sprint T-Mobile store that I had split another space. So he goes, okay, that's a good deal. And I said, and then after football season, we'll sit down and talk. I said, what are you doing in the warehouse in sales? He says, $300,000. I said, okay, you're going to double that here. And he goes, from your mouth to God's ears. So he comes in, fixes up the space, opens the store, and guess what he did in the first football season, Augie?
Did he double it?
More than doubled it.
Wow.
$850,000. So now he's sold. I said, okay, well, what we're going to do is next football season, it's $5,000 a month, and you can pay $1,000 a month during your off months. So we did that for probably 2 years until I put him on a real lease. I think my rents were $40 a square foot. He's now over $1 million in 1,100 square feet.
Wow.
And he's doing another $1 million in online sales in the aisleways of this retail store. He had no storage. He had one of those storage trucks in the back. So I said, you need to move to the center is 42,000 square feet, but it's in 2 buildings, so 21,000 each. I go, you need to move in the north building. No, I don't want to move away from my location and the sub guy. And I'm like, they're going to follow you. So I get him to move over. He takes now 2,800 square feet. And so now he has 1,000 square feet for shipping and warehouse that he's paying prime rent on. And now his bigger store is I think it's 1,800 and then 1,000. He's been in there for 4 years, and I just signed a new lease with him to go back To the other side, he's going to take 4,500 square feet.
Wow.
He's approaching, I think, over somewhere between $3 and $4 million.
Oh my word.
And I found him in a warehouse.
Yeah. That's crazy because, I mean, it just speaks so much of a testament to, and once you've done this so many times and you've done it long enough with so many tenants that you have the real life scenario stories like this. But that's one thing, it's a metric that's very hard to predict when you're trying to, lease a vacant space or tenant rep somebody into a new space, because you obviously can't promise that they're going to 10x their revenue.
Right.
But there is something very real to be said about floor plan and visibility and a 65,000 car a day traffic count. So there's just so much to be said about that, and like I said, it's really hard to like put a number on it because there's so many other metrics. Like obviously they have to have a good business model and they have to be
right. They have
good
to
with
give
money
good product, good service, right? Like he said I just spoke to him a couple weeks ago and they had a big first game of the year. He said it beat like 3 years ago, and people were saying there's nowhere else that has the product you have. So he sources good product, which makes people then drive 20 minutes to go to him, because versus it's either him or the campus down in Miami, and I'm 50 minutes from the campus. So he's smart that he gets unique. It's not anything you can go into Dick's to get. He has unique products.
Yeah, no, that's very smart. And
so I'm an equal opportunity landlord.
Yeah, right.
I pull for the hurricanes all but one day a year.
Yeah, no, that's funny and just crazy that I can't believe that 10x somebody's revenue is.
And I painted, so I have red light poles. Red's my favorite color. Mm-hmm. So in the shopping center, I have red light poles, but in front of his store, they're orange and green. Wow,
that's special. That shows you're dedicated to your real estate and your clients even more than your football team and alma mater. That's which you don't find a lot in Florida. I mean, a lot of, as you know, a lot of these Florida folks, whether they're Hurricanes or Gators or Seminoles, it's like live and die. So I actually just married into the Florida Gator football family.
Oh,
they're like,
boo!
Yeah, exactly. So it's like 5 generations deep. And that was one of the first questions she asked me. She's like, hey, where'd you go to school? And then like felt me out and was just like, and she said like, as long as you're not a Seminole fan, like, and she, like some families do this like house divided thing,
right.
And it's like
the little license plates.
They do the bumper plates and stuff, and her family's like,
oh no,
not at all. Like it's not, like her grandpa played basketball there. Like her parents met there, her grandparents met there. So like I said, it's like 4 or 5 generations deep of some serious.
We're serious. We're serious
Gators.
down here. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good fun.
Yeah, I don't think I could have done that with a Gator, or I would definitely have never painted my poles blue or orange.
Yeah, there's certain lines. Certain lines, and that one, the orange and blue and garnet and gold, it doesn't. But I did. So my high school is the Lake Gibson Braves. So like. Yes, very much like Seminole Indian tribe, and the war chant just gets me, pounding in the fourth quarter, like at my old high school stadium. That just gets me going. I just love that, and like anytime I hear it, it kind of gets me jacked up. And Brittany, my wife, she's just like, kind of gives me the mean mug, like don't vibe to that, don't rock your head. What are you doing? Like
that's funny.
It is a funny thing. Well, I don't want to keep you all day. Before we go, is there anything other than the conference that's coming up for women that are wanting to start investing in real estate? What else is going on that you're excited about? And also with the conference too, where can they find out more information not only about you but about the conference and get signed up for that as well?
So they can follow me on LinkedIn. Probably that's the best place. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, and definitely in my Instagram bio, we have the link to the conference. So for any women that want to invest, it's going to be in Orlando this year on March 8th. It's International Women's Business Day. And, if they want, it's, we've had some men show up last year, but it's mainly for women, because even though there are more women joining the C-suite, there's a very, very small percentage of women that are investing. So that's my biggest mission in the next 6 months that I'm focused on.
Yeah, and that's great because as you know, from being C-suite and being an investor, not saying one's better than the other, but it's significantly different, and the advantages to investing and cash flow and growing that generational wealth, it's special, and there's nothing like it. So I think that's really cool. So for anybody watching, especially the women in the room, please go follow Beth and check out the conference. I know that's going to be awesome. So once again, thank you so much for coming on, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Augie. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Bye.